Welcome to another video on writing tips and tricks for the IELTS exam. In IELTS Writing Task 1, Academic, when the data in a line graph, a bar graph, a pie chart, or a table relates to a period of time, you need to be able to describe change. In this video, we're going to look at the second of three structures you can use to do that in the IELTS test in order to improve your grammatical range and accuracy. It will also help you with your IELTS preparation in terms of formal vocabulary so that you can avoid using verbs such as go up or go down. I'm going to play a short extract from an early video in which I walk you through the structure, and then I'll tell you how you can practice using it every day in a fun way until it becomes automatic. The second structure is a verb followed by an adverb. And remember, adverbs end in ly. So sales increased significantly. The nouns that we used with the first structure, you can also use as verbs with the second structure. So increase in the past simple, we take some historical data, let's say. So sales increased, or rise becomes rose. Decrease becomes decreased, fall becomes fell, decline becomes declined. And we've got a mixture here of regular verbs and irregular verbs. So again, you've got some variety grammatically there to impress the examiner if you're doing the actual exam. Then with the adverbs, again, all the adjectives were used. We can now turn into adverbs by adding ly. So significant becomes significantly, considerable becomes considerably, marked becomes markedly. Just be aware of the difference in pronunciation there. Although if you're writing, obviously that's not going to be relevant. And substantial becomes substantially. So 4 words for big, for a major change, slightly and marginally for a more minor change, and a very big change dramatically. Just remember that with dramatic, the adjective, there is no al, but when we form the adverb, we add al and then ly. So occasionally you just need to be aware of variations like that. Because we've now got sales as a subject, we don't need to worry about a preposition here. Like there was a significant increase in sales. Sales is now the subject. With both of these structures, the adjective plus noun and the verb plus adverb, you may well want to use some kind of time reference. So, for example, sales increased significantly between 1990 and 1995, and then they declined marginally from 1995 to 2000. Before we move to the third structure and look at that, I just want to say a word about the nouns and verbs we've been using in the first 2 structures. We've used increase and decrease, rise, fall, and decline. And the reason I've chosen those is that you can use all of them either as nouns or as verbs, which means you don't have to worry about whether you can use them in one structure but not in the other structure. Let me give you an example. you could say sales rocketed, where you're using rocket as a verb. Now, rocket does exist as a noun, but in this context, you couldn't say there was a rocket in sales. You could say there was a rocket in the sky last night and some little green men came out of it. In fact, one of them is standing just behind you as you're watching this video. So be careful if you use rocket. I'm not saying don't use it, but you need to be careful because it's easier to make mistakes with those words that aren't in the system. On our system, instead of saying sales rocketed, we could say sales increased dramatically, which gives us an extra word and is also a more sophisticated grammatical structure because we're using the verb with an adverb correctly. Again, instead of saying there was a rocket in sales, which would be wrong, we can say there was a dramatic increase in sales. And again, you've got an extra word and it's a more sophisticated grammatical structure. That's the grammatical structure and the formal vocabulary. So now let me tell you how you can practice using them every day in a fun way until they become second nature. Find a line graph that shows the price of Ethereum and say aloud, for example, yesterday the price of Ethereum fell markedly. Remember that the adverb markedly comes after the verb, and it would be fell in the past simple because fall is an irregular verb. Fall, fell, fallen. Then you could say, today the price of Ethereum has risen slightly. Again, the adverb comes after the verb, and it would be has risen in the present perfect, because rise is also an irregular verb. Rise, rose, risen. Let me again make it clear that I'm just suggesting a way in which you can practice your English for IELTS Writing Task 1 that is fun. I'm not giving financial advice.